Hi, this is Andy Young, and welcome to another edition of Math Solutions Online. Suppose you've been asked to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. This method involves adjusting the left-hand side of the equation into a perfect square. A perfect square is the square of a linear equation, like this. So, for example, x squared plus 6x plus 9 is a perfect square because it equals x plus 3 quantity squared. So by adding the correct number, in this case 9, to the left and right hand side of x squared plus 6x equals 0, we would have been able to complete the square. So how would we complete the square of a quadratic equation like this? Suppose we have x squared plus 5x plus 4 equals 0. Well, we always begin by rewriting the equation with the constant on the right-hand side. So in this case, subtract 4 from both sides of this equation, and that will give us x squared plus 5x equals negative 4. Now, as a word of caution, if the initial coefficient is some number other than 1, if it's a 2 or a 3 or whatever, then we need to divide. In order for completing the square method to work, we have to divide everything on the left and the right hand side by whatever that value is, because we have to have a coefficient of 1 here. If we don't have a coefficient of 1 here, the method of completing the square will not work. So we rearrange the equation so that the constant's on the right by subtracting 4 from both sides of the equation. Next, we take the coefficient in front of the x, not the x squared, but in front of the x, and cut it in half or divide it by 2. So that would give us 5 halves. But then we have to square that amount in order to give us 5 squared is 25, and 2 squared is 4. So 25 fourths. So we're going to add that square completing factor to both sides of this equation, giving us x squared plus 5x plus 25 over 4 is equal to negative 4 plus 25 over 4. So this is the method of completing the square. And the square is actually complete when we rewrite this in its new equivalent form, x plus whatever this was before you squared it. And in this case, it's just 5 halves. So that's a perfect square. And then we want to simplify the right-hand side. So 25 fourths minus 4. I'm going to assume you know how to add and subtract fractions. Will give you 9 fourths. Now, we want to take the square root plus or minus the square root, because remember, when you square a negative number, you get a positive result. So we can take plus or minus the square root of both sides, giving us on the left-hand side the stuff within the square, x plus 5 halves, and that's equal to plus or minus the square root of 9 fourths. So then we just have to x equals, or x plus 5 halves equals plus or minus the square root of 9 fourths. The square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 4 is 2. And then from here, all we need to do is subtract 5 halves from both sides of this equation, which gives us x equals negative 5 halves plus or minus 3 halves. And remember, always box your answer so the teacher knows exactly what you intended.